All right. So for everyone having just finished Variant at Trash Day in Static Vision HQ, I'm now talking to the great writer, director, special effects artist, many other things, Joe Meredith. Thanks again, Joe, for talking to me today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Well, I'm going to start with like just kind of a big, broad question. Your debut film, according to the internet, is 2018 South Mill District. So can you talk about what your filmmaking origins are? How did you get started?
Started really early on as a kid with a camcorder. Um, yeah, just making movies with friends in the neighborhood growing up, and did that for through my teenage years, and um, eventually stopped for a while, and then picked it back up with South Mill District and the series that followed that.
Cool. And where are you based? Sorry, like where were you making movies growing up with the camcorder?
Um, I live in Alabama
Hmm.
in the United States.
Cool, cool. Now, as I understand it, South Mill District and Toronto Morph were shot digitally, right? But Variant and Variant 2 were shot on VHS. So can you talk about this shift and just your relationship with both forms of filming tech?
Sure. Yeah, the first two movies they were shot on more of a contemporary digital camera, and they had this very like slick look to them. So with the third installment, I wanted to go with something grimier, like more absurd, and play with more absurd themes. So that's kind of where the VHS thing came along, as well as wanting to make it almost as if it's a video recording of some sort of rogue broadcast, maybe sort of switching from channel to channel. So that's where I think actually started out trying to shoot Variant the same way as the first two, and I was just tired of the way it looked. So everything was with a videotape after that.
Cool. Do you still feel like is the videotape where you're with for the next few films, you think?
Yeah, with Variant 2, I continued using even lower grade video, which was fun. Um, and currently, what I'm working on is also with primarily video and yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Uh, all of your films have really fantastically like doomy shots of the surrounding environments. You got a lot of lonesome buildings and overcast skies, and there's some burning factories. Like, how do you approach setting in your films? Do you have like a location scout's eye always on when you're out and about?
A lot of times, I shoot a lot of B-roll prior to like the principal photography. Um, so yeah, I'm always on the lookout for cool B-roll shots. Yeah, and I'm just really drawn to like abandoned spaces, and just desolate scenes too. So sometimes that helps out a lot in informing the general vibe, or atmosphere of what the project will end up being.
And are you like a really heavy planner? Like, is there a lot of scripting beforehand, or are you figuring stuff out more as you're filming?
Um, there's usually a general idea and maybe some outlining that goes on with it. For up until Variant, one of the things was usually like special effects limitations, where when I realized that I couldn't pull off an effect the way that I originally wanted to, um, then that kind of like informed what was going to be left out of it. Um, whereas whereas now, I guess I think I'm a little bit better at planning it out and scripting it out more because I have a lot more confidence with the effects. So um, for the most part, I can, if I have an idea for an effect, I know that I can probably pull it off. And so yeah, I don't usually use traditional scripts. Uh, it's usually like an outline or just it's written up in fragments. Um, and then yeah, during filming, I mean, um, I'm always I'm always down for like improvisation and that sort of thing while shooting the movie.
Mhm.
It's all very guerrilla style.
Cool. Yeah. Uh, and I mean, I guess off of what you were talking about a minute ago with how a lot of it's informed by how you can approach the special effects. I mean, all your movies obviously have really awesome special effects. Very, I mean, they're really gross, but they're also really beautiful in their own way. I think. And you're credited as the with creature design, and then you and James Bell are credited with special effects for Variant. And can you just talk about your history in making creepy, gooey things, and what's your process in even just conceiving them for each film?
Yeah, I worked with James Bell a lot. Well, at least from South Mill District on, and he did most of the effects for South, with the exception of the creatures in South Mill and Terratomorph. And so I learned a lot from him actually about making special effects. And and then as far as he was mostly doing like the human gore effects, and I was concentrated on the creatures. So I've always been really drawn to creature design and do a lot of creature design. So um, mostly it's just designing a creature, liking the way it looks, and then figuring out how I'm going to pull it off. So it started with South Mill being with like tape and spray paint and wire and like gelatin to eventually using like more traditional like silicone products.
And was that like a self-teaching process? Like, so you said James was teaching about a lot of it, but did he have formal training? Like, where are you learning and building these skills?
No, actually, I can't say that he has formal training at all, and uh, I don't either. It's pretty much just, yeah, just like looking at uh, YouTube tutorials sometimes to see how something is done. Um, with his case, it was more about making molds and what to do and what not to do, and um, the silicone product in general is very versatile and can is just very useful for this kind of effects making.
And with like in terms of what draws you to a creature, have you kind of seen certain recurring things in your own work of like this is a sort of visual idea that you are attracted to in designing these creatures?
Um, I don't fully understand.
Like, I guess what I'm asking is, uh, when you're designing the things you're designing, do you find there to be specific things that you're continually attracted to in making? Like for instance, I would think like multiple skulls is a thing I would think of with the Joe Meredith movie, right? So is there anything in your own work that you've seen that way, or that you think about when you're designing stuff?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I guess the creature design is very important to me. So that usually comes from just like sketching creature ideas until I eventually hit on something that I want to add to a project. Um, so yeah, for the most part, it's just like whether or not I catch a really good creature design idea or not. So I'm always looking for that.
Now it's been a hot minute, but I do have one more specific question on the gore. So there's this green vomit invariant that the Adrian character wakes up to on their bed, and it's really gross. Do you remember how specifically y'all made that makeup or that effect?
It's actually just oatmeal with green food coloring.
Wow, that's it's so simple. It's so gross in the film. I was just rewatching
Yeah.
it. Wow, uh, awesome, awesome. Okay, let me go back a little bit on questions. Okay, I want to talk to you about the music because in your movies, because I was rewatching most of your films, and I think it's really interesting that you all have a really good balance of like industrial noise, but then some really melodic stuff. Especially that really great guitar track in Variant when the Adrian character is stealing the embryo. So, can you talk about the music process? I know you do with some of it, and then so also Samuel Barnett and Joel Barnett have also done some of it.
Yes. Um, yeah. So I do a lot of the more like ambient industrial scoring, and then when I need like real musicianship, I go with them. So uh, they've been close friends of mine for years, and they're just really good musicians. So yeah, the unsavory conclusion track you're talking about, the kind of the guitar track in Variant is written by Joel Barnett, and yeah, he's just a very talented guitar player, and put that together for the movie. So um, yeah, it's an awesome track. And but yeah, other than that, I mean, myself, I can't really say I'm much of a musician, but I've always messed around with just like ambience for film projects and all. So so yeah, just collect a lot of different tracks, and then some of them end up making it on movies.
Mhm. And when you're working with Joel or Sam, are you giving them much direction, or are you just going like, here's the vibe, go for it?
Yeah, I think sometimes, usually with that, I'll send them tracks that are like examples that of something I would want to hear. For that, it was like a track that I don't even remember the name of, that was from a Metro 2033 game. You're
Hmm.
familiar with those?
Yeah.
And it was just kind of this like creepy sort of rural kind of country type ambient song. And so then he just kind of like took the vibe of that track and made something his own.
Cool. Cool. You just mentioned Metro 33, and I also see the two great posters behind you. I was going to ask, are there some reference points in your filmmaking career that you often go back to, or just you think have been influential on you?
uh yeah, I mean, I've always been I grew up on horror movies, and um early on I was very into the Alien series. Certainly the work of John Carpenter. um you know Survival horror games, obviously, too, were a big influence, especially as it relates to the creature design and all of that is part of the late '90s, early 2000s survival horror games. Um, yeah, I mean, and then just in general, I mean, Return of the Living Dead, even like something like the Blair Witch Project, even was always had pretty strong impact on me. And yeah.
Cool. Cool. Um, all right. So, next question is: your four films so far have revolved around the nefarious Eon Corp. Uh,
Yeah.
I know you talked about you don't have like necessarily traditional scripting when you're writing these films, but how do you treat the lore? Is there like a serious continuity in your head, or are you just figuring it out? And what draws you back to this kind of milieu and this setting and this corporation as a character?
Um, yeah, it's South Mill District started out with as kind of like a sequel to stories that I was writing as a kid, and like comic books and videos that I made as a kid. So that was kind of like the years after the events of those stories. Um, and so yeah, it was just kind of a return to this sort of like childhood subject matter, and then I just kind of expanded on it from there. Um, so yeah, that's, for the most part, it is kind of its own like science fiction horror world that has this like entire backstory that is just like in a box somewhere. And uh and yeah, it was just fun to do it that way.
Awesome. Awesome. And do you think you still have in the future, or is Eon Corp still going to be like a driving force of your work?
No, well, with Variant, that was kind of supposed to be the end of Eon Corp. um I know, obviously, in Variant 2, which I guess I shouldn't talk too much about that.
We'll talk a little
Eon
bit
Corp.
about questions. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, okay, sorry. Eon Corp is still sort of like, it's I mean, it's after the fall of Eon Corp is kind of what Variant 2 is, and sort of all of the contingency protocols that are taking place um, after the company went under. But yeah, like now, I think what I'm doing is kind of I still like the interconnected universe idea, to where one of the main projects I'm working on now, I would say, is more like, it definitely takes place in the same world, but it's not uh, related to Eon Core or any of that. So it's kind of going along its own path.
Awesome. Awesome. Uh, your films seem to be a family affair. City Meredith has multiple acting and production credits on every film, and Toronto Morph stars a young Elijah Meredith. So I was just wondering, what's it like to collaborate on these films with your fam?
It's great. I love that they're as into doing it as they are. Eli, my son, was 8 at the time of Terratomorph, and yeah, he was really thrilled to do it. It was a lot of fun doing that. And Sydney, she's like, you know, kind of always encouraging me, and she's always willing to do just about anything, which is cool too. And yeah, we have a lot of fun.
Great, great. I do want to ask you a little bit about Variant 2. We won't get into too many specifics because I hope the audience will go out now and then go buy the DVD, I hope. But on the DVD, you explained that it was partially built from the remains of like an unfinished feature film. And I just want you to speak a bit about that production and also how you refashioned it into the awesome movie that Variant 2 is, regardless.
Yeah, so Variant 2 started out as a movie called The Pale Strain, which was mostly to do with the clown creatures that you see in Variant 2. Um, and that story just was just very undercooked. And so I decided to scrap that. And I had already begun filming um, Variant 2, which was like more so the pink ooze zombies that you see at the beginning. Um, so ultimately, I decided to make it kind of that anthology style, I guess, and it worked really well for what it was.
Mhm. So did the video game framing device like that come in later in the process then?
Uh, that was actually already an element in yeah, I mean it was already an element for Variant 2 before the Pell Strain also became part of it. So um, yeah, whenever I decided to make it this kind of anthology style, um, then that like informed the way the Ghost Town video game would play out.
Cool. Cool. Um, okay, you have released your four medium length features on DVD, and that's currently the only way to watch at least most of them, I think. Although you can watch the Russian dub of Toronto Morph on your YouTube
Yeah.
page. Can you just talk about your experiences in and your ideas about self distribution?
um, I don't fully understand.
How did you decide to initially to release your films on DVD? And do you have like how do you approach just putting your movies out in general?
So when I'm making South Mill District, my plan was just to post it on YouTube. But I had been for some years uh, doing like cover designs for a lot of these sort of micro budget horror movies um, that were just being released on DVD or VHS. So I didn't expect South Mill District to be as long as it ended up being, which was only 25 minutes. But I felt that it was a good enough length that I could do a physical release. So then every movie after that has been longer. Um, so yeah, I mean, people still do like the physical releases, even though I know that they say that's kind of on the downward slope right now. But yeah, I enjoy physical releases myself, and sort of the artwork that's involved, and people having the cover designs and like alternate cover designs and that sort of thing.
Are you ever tempted to like put your movies on Tubi or something?
Uh, I've I have thought about that. I just never really pulled the trigger on trying to do it.
Mhm. Well, I mean, it gives your movies a certain mysterious quality about them as well that you have to seek them out like this. I think it makes them
Yeah.
feel more special as well, which is nice. So you said you're based in Alabama, right?
Yes.
Is there much of like an arts or filmmaking scene around you, or are you one of the few people around you?
Well, in my area where I live, no, I'm pretty much the only one that I know of, at least. Um, but it turns out that the state of Alabama, it does have, at least more north of me, is kind of got a burgeoning like filmmaking scene, and there's a lot of people in the state that are trying to make it more of a uh, film based, state, because it's got a lot of great locations and all. But yeah, down where I'm at, yeah, not many.
Um, well, I mean, how I'm kind of building off that. Like, how do you feel about independent cinema today? If you have any thoughts on it, are there any like working filmmakers that you're into?
Um, I would say, like 8 or so years ago, there was like a really like it was like a really like burgeoning indie horror scene, like mostly out of the Midwest. So for some reason, a lot of them are out of Ohio and Michigan and all. Um, Now I don't feel like it's as, at least I don't really know. I mean, I can't really. can't really say for sure, but I feel like it's not as what's the word I'm looking for? It's not as prominent. It's not as prevalent, I guess, as maybe it has been before. Which hopefully that won't continue to be that way.
Mm-hmm. And are there any like filmmakers who who are working now that like that you're into, or just any movies recently that you dubbed?
Well, again, I'll have to mention James Bell, who, as I've worked with. I don't know if you've seen any of his movies before, but definitely worth checking out. There's a guy, there's one filmmaker, Patrick 14, out of Canada, who does really cool work. It's really like ultra gory kind of stuff. James Bell is too. But James Bell, you'll see a lot of the very music oriented, like atmosphere oriented, gritty style. I think you'd really enjoy those.
Yeah. Awesome.
Let's see. I know there are people, but I just am drawing a blank right now.
Was on the spot, but you said some great stuff. I can't believe I didn't know James had made some films. I got to check him out. And James, you said James 14 as well.
Patrick 14.
Patrick 14. There you go. And my final question for you today is just what's next? What's the next project for you?
So right now, like I said, I'm working on a pretty different movie from the Eon Corp series. It's a slasher movie. It's a darker, kind of like more. I'm trying to be at least a more disturbing take on a slasher style movie, getting away from kind of the cartoonish comedy aspects of Variant 2. And simultaneously, I'm working on another project, but that's I guess I shouldn't really say too much about that one. But mostly right now is the slasher movie that I'm focusing on the most.
Amazing. Well, I'm very excited. Well, to everyone in the audience, you can and should buy Joe's films on DVD from joemeredithart.storenv.com for very reasonable prices. Joe, any last words before we sign off?
No, I hope everyone enjoyed the movie, and thanks a lot for showing it, and thanks a lot for talking to me.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
and I'll stop recording.